Meredith started spelling that out. Marcus, standing behind her with a paper plate of cake, said loud enough for the whole yard to hear that Theo was just doing it for attention, that kids fake limps all the time when they want sympathy. My mother laughed. Actually laughed, and told Theo to walk normal for the pictures. I heard my brother-in-law tell my 10-year-old son to stop faking his limp, so he wouldn't ruin the graduation photos. My parents told me to just get Theo to stand up straight for one picture. I picked my son up, brace and all, and left the party without a word. 3 days later, I opened a folder of trust account statements that showed exactly where $11,000 of my son's medical fund had actually gone. My name is Meredith Cole. I'm 38, a physical therapist, and for most of my life I believed my family simply didn't know how to talk about hard things out loud. I told myself their silence around Theo's condition was awkwardness, not cruelty. That excuse died on a Saturday afternoon in my sister's backyard, and it took my son's confused, hurt face to finally show me the difference. Theo has mild cerebral palsy, diagnosed when he was 2. It affects the right side of his gait. Nothing that stops him from living a full, loud, funny life, but enough that some days he wears a lightweight brace to keep his ankle steady. My late father, before he died 4 years ago, set up a modest trust specifically for Theo's ongoing therapy and equipment, $22,000, managed jointly by my mother and my brother-in-law Grant, who ran a small construction company and had, everyone agreed, a good head for numbers. I never questioned that arrangement. Grief makes you trust the people grief hands you. The party was for my nephew Caleb's high school graduation, hosted at my sister Paige's house. Extended family, neighbors, 40 or 50 people crowded onto a deck strung with lights. Theo had been looking forward to it for weeks. He loves Caleb, follows him around like a smaller shadow. Looking back now, there were signs in the months before that party that I let slide past me. Grant mentioning, almost too casually, that business had been slow and he'd had to move some things around. My mother saying the trust paperwork was handled, whenever I asked for an update, in a tone that discouraged follow-up questions. A late invoice from Theo's brace fitting that Grant insisted he'd already paid, though the clinic said otherwise. A text from Paige, sent and then deleted within the hour, that only said don't ask Grant about the account right now. I saw the notification. I never saw the message again. I told myself it was nothing. Families run on assumed goodwill, and I had a son with real needs and no time to chase shadows. The photographer gathered the family for a group shot near the end of the party. Theo, tired from running around all afternoon, had started favoring his right leg the way he does when the muscle fatigues. He wasn't limping dramatically. He was just walking the way his body actually walks. Grant, standing behind him arranging people for the photo, put a hand on Theo's shoulder and told him to knock it off, that he was faking for attention and ruining the shot. My mother laughed and told him to walk normal for the picture. Not one adult standing there corrected either of them. I crossed that deck faster than I remember deciding to. I knelt down to Theo's height. His eyes were wet, not from pain, but from the particular confusion of being mocked for something he can't control by an adult he trusted. I told him he did nothing wrong. Then I stood up, and Paige grabbed my arm and asked me quietly not to make a scene in front of Caleb's friends. My father would have wanted this to be a happy day, she said, as if invoking a dead man could erase what had just happened to a living child. I picked Theo up, brace, sneakers, and all, and carried him to the car. I did not look back at the deck. Theo cried the whole drive home, then fell asleep before we reached our street. I sat in our kitchen that night, turning the last 4 years over in my head, and one detail kept surfacing: the invoice Grant swore he'd paid. The next morning I called Theo's clinic directly and asked them to email me an itemized billing history for the trust account, going back to the year my father died. What came back over the following 2 days unraveled slowly, then all at once. The clinic's records showed 3 unpaid invoices Grant had told me, in person, he'd settled personally out of his own pocket as a favor. When I requested a full statement from the trust's bank, the numbers told a different story. Over 18 months, Grant had authorized 4 transfers out of Theo's trust into an account belonging to his construction company, totaling just under $11,000. Each transfer was accompanied by a consent form, requiring my signature as co-guardian. I had never signed any of them. The signature on all 4 forms was close enough to pass a distracted glance, but the T in my last name looped the wrong direction, something my actual signature never does. My father's trust, meant to keep my son walking without pain, had quietly financed payroll for a failing construction business. I sat with that for 2 days before doing anything, because I needed to be certain I wasn't reacting out of anger alone. I pulled every bank statement, every invoice, every version of that forged consent form, and had Theo's clinic confirm in writing which bills had genuinely gone unpaid. I brought copies to a paralegal I'd worked with years earlier, through a patient referral, who walked me through what forged financial documents attached to a minor's trust actually meant legally. She used the word fraud, plainly, without hesitation, and helped me draft a formal accounting demand addressed to both trustees. I stayed calm through all of it. At Sunday dinners, I passed the potatoes and asked Grant polite questions about his business, watching him answer easily, unaware that I already had 4 forged signatures sitting in a folder in my car. I became 2 people that month. One who smiled and asked about Caleb's college plans, one who was quietly building a file that would end a comfortable lie. Grant, meanwhile, grew bolder. 3 weeks after the party, at a community fundraiser where his company was being recognized for local youth sports sponsorship, he stood at a podium in front of nearly 100 people and thanked his family for their unwavering support in helping him keep the business afloat during, in his words, a difficult stretch. My mother beamed in the front row. He had no idea I was standing near the back with the paralegal's letter already filed and a copy of the forged consent forms in my bag. I didn't wait for a quieter moment. When the applause faded and people began mingling near the refreshment table, I walked up to Grant, my mother, and Paige together, and asked, evenly, whether either trustee could explain 4 transfers totaling nearly $11,000 out of a special needs trust that was never meant to touch his company's payroll. I laid copies of the forged forms on the table between the punch bowls. I told them the loop on that signature wasn't mine, and that the bank's fraud department had already confirmed it. "This isn't a family disagreement anymore," I said. "This is theft from a child's medical fund, and I have already reported it." The color left Grant's face before he said a single word. My mother reached for the papers and then stopped, as if touching them might make it more real. Paige stood very still. I didn't raise my voice once. Within 3 weeks, under pressure from the bank's own compliance review and the paralegal's formal demand letter, Grant repaid the full $11,000, verified through the trust's financial institution, not through a promise at a dinner table. My mother was removed as co-trustee at my request, replaced by a neutral, licensed fiduciary. Grant's construction company lost its sponsorship spot with the Youth Sports League once the fraud came up in casual town conversation. The same casual conversation my family had always relied on to smooth things over now working against him instead. My mother has never fully apologized. Paige has, once, quietly, admitting she saw the deleted text for what it was, and said nothing because she didn't want to believe it. I've let her back in slowly, on my terms. Theo still asks sometimes why Uncle Grant doesn't come to birthdays anymore. And I tell him the truth scaled down to something a 10-year-old can hold, that some people lose the right to be close to you when they hurt you, and don't fix it honestly. He wears his brace without apologizing for it now. He walks into rooms the way he actually walks, and nobody corrects him for a photo anymore. That, more than the repaid money, is the justice that matters to me. So here's what I still think about. If you'd been standing on that deck, watching an adult mock a child for a limp he can't control, while your own parents laughed along, would you have picked your son up and walked away in silence? Or would you have said something out loud right there, before you even had proof?